I think to be a careful investor, you should also look at the countries that you invest in to make sure that they have a capacity to grow and that they're going to be doing well in the future. There's a paper here, the Carnegie Papers, called Making the Transition from Middle Income to Advanced Economies by Foxley and Sosdorf. And what they found is two countries in particular were more successful countries in the bunch, particularly Finland and South Korea. They set themselves apart from the rest by investing early in improving the quality of education and inducing high investment in research and development. So I was looking at that specifically as that research and development, as the economy grows and becomes advanced, they only grow because they are investing more in technology, and that specifically is measurable by the R&D investment of the country. From here, what I did is I went to OECD.org to look at the data of the different countries and how they spend in their R&D relative to the GDP. So it's a relative measure. I specifically was looking at the country that I live in to see what the future of the economy would look like. In particular, would the wealth decrease over time, or would I become wealthier in that country? The United States shows on a relative basis, relative to the OECD total, it has a very high R&D spend and is increasing. If you look at some countries here that really have collapsed quite a bit, the two countries are Australia and Canada. So it may not matter too much if you invest in global companies that are based in Canada, but certainly if you're investing in the domestic economy, you should be very careful about this. The paper talked about Korea, and as you can see here, Korea is really rising extremely fast in terms of R&D spend relative to their GDP. Israel, for example, also has been investing heavily in R&D spending relative to GDP. They really are outstanding compared to the United States down here and OECD total. Really, they're just a complete rocket ship in terms of their R&D spending. And just for fun, you can look at, for example, Russia. Their R&D spend relative to their GDP is basically almost non-existent. It's not even close. So therefore, you really have to be cautious about investing there. And here's Finland that they discussed in the paper. They also rose very high in R&D spending, but since have fallen dramatically. And now relative to the United States is below the United States. So things also change quite quickly over time as well. For example, Canada and Finland, you would never expect them to fall so dramatically in their R&D spending. These things happen on quite short timescales, actually. And so be aware of that. Also, I think that to get back up to the levels that they previously were is very difficult as well. I think the next thing I'll do is look at how much money they would actually have to spend in R&D spending just to get back up to the levels that they were years ago. So I think it's very useful to visit OECD.org to plot some of these countries out and to find out where your money is going to be treated best. Also, it gives you a sense of how the countries will be treating their scientists and how the sort of general feeling of living in that country and existing there. If they are obliterating their spend in science and technology, and you're a scientist, then you might really have to think both about your investment and as well as whether you want to continue living there. On the other hand, countries that spend a lot of money on R&D really will be treating the sort of youngest minds and the most driven people, the most successful people, they might be treating them a lot better. In conjunction with this dramatic decrease in R&D spending, you might also see a migration of scientists to the United States. In Canada, 60% of computer scientists leave for the United States. So I hope that looking at OEC data could help you make the right decisions when you invest.